Governor Maura Healey says the state's shelter system is in crisis, and this week she declared a state of emergency as more and more migrants arrive seeking somewhere to stay. Last year, the governor's office says 3,100 migrant families lived in state-funded shelters like hotels and college dorms. This year, that number's jumped to 5,600.
We see that both the administration, communities, and our existing shelter infrastructure have really been maxing out. We just simply are running out of capacity.
Healey also asked the federal government for more financial help and to speed up the work authorization process so new migrants can find jobs sooner. GBH News reporter Sarah Betancourt has been following this story closely. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This has been brewing, as you pointed out in your coverage this week, for a while. Why is the Healey administration taking this action right now?
I mean, like you said, it's been brewing for a while. Since last summer, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott has been sending migrants north on buses to New York City. And we started seeing that overflow in September, and then with the Martha's Vineyard migrants brought here by Governor Ron DeSantis. But now that a federal law in policy has sort of lifted from the border.
This is Title 42, the Trump era.
Now that's been lifted since May. More migrants are coming, fleeing a lot of humanitarian disasters down in Haiti and South America, violence, political turmoil. And so now they're able to come north. And that's why we're seeing increasing numbers. So she's had to act now.
So do you think that in taking the steps she did with this emergency declaration, is that going to help migrants and the people who are providing services to them? And if so, how quickly is it going to help them?
So that's a really good question. In New York, the governor there declared a state of emergency in May. And they're just starting to get over $104 million in funds directed to New York City, which has seen over 95,000 migrant families in just the past year. And we're not seeing quite as many in Massachusetts, but they've already significantly contributed to the strain in the emergency assistance system. There's an 80% increase in just a year alone. So being able to declare that emergency, state of emergency, means that Healey can more quickly expedite state contracts with shelter providers, open up some housing if they can even find it. But it also allows her to ask FEMA for money. And New York City has been able to do that, New York and El Paso. So that should be able to go to service providers and help with housing, food, health care, all of those things.
And I think you wrote this week, it also lets her deploy the National Guard to help these people if she decides that's the way to go, right?
Yeah, it expedites that. She has already done that in Joint Base Cape Cod, which is a voluntary shelter, like people can voluntarily go there for shelter. However, they can only house about, I think, 52 families, and they were pretty much at capacity as of a few weeks ago.
I'm sure that you've written it. I didn't realize the number was that small, and it just pales so much in comparison with the need that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there was a call to action by the state, 2 individuals on Monday saying, if you have, like, an in-law apartment, try to consider hosting a family, very similar to what the state had asked for Afghans and Ukrainians, but in a less formal setting. And right now there's about 15 to 20 host families that have volunteered in the past few months, but they're only called upon to host migrants for like 2 to 3 days, and they're seeking more people to help.
I should ask you, before that gets lost in the shuffle, because I want to ask you a couple more questions. If people want to heed that call, what do they do?
They can email shelterhelp at mass.gov or call 211. There's also 2 welcome centers, one at the Brazilian Workers Center in Alston and another at East Nazarene College in Quincy, where they're seeking volunteers and people to help out there, donations like diapers, that sort of thing. And a lot of migrants are actually staying on site in Quincy. So those are the ways people can help. And, you know, if they have an extra space available for someone to stay in, the state is going to start implementing background checks to make sure those spaces are safe, but that's an option.
Governor Healey wants the federal government to change work authorization rules so these people can get jobs sooner, support themselves, get access to services. What are the current work authorization rules in place for the migrants who are coming?
I mean, that's such a huge issue. Everyone that I've interviewed who's a migrant family member has said, I want to work. And a lot of people have to work under the table because they're technically undocumented. They haven't applied for asylum. But once they do apply for asylum, they have to wait a short period of time and apply for work authorization, which can only be issued by the federal government. And right now, the wait time for those work permits, there's such a backlog that it's 8 months to a year and a half. And it's a mess. People want to work, but to afford Massachusetts and a lot of New England states, you need to be able to come up with $10,000 first class security broker fee. So people don't have that when they're starting from zero.
So how likely is it that the federal government will end up changing work authorization requirements in response to calls like the governor's, but also calls from other public officials?
I mean, there are a lot of calls from both Republicans and Democrats alike. Like, there's two pieces of legislation actually coming from Maine legislators, one Republican in the Senate and one Democrat Pingree in the House, and they're calling to expedite that time period down to 30 days. There hasn't been too much success. They're relatively new pieces of legislation, given that the crisis has significantly increased since May.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's sort of too soon to tell, but the federal government could expedite these things. They just need to put more bodies and redirect their workflow.
Last question for you. You'll have about 30 seconds to answer it. Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, his administration actually printed up flyers that it distributed to people saying, don't come to New York. We don't have room for you. Could you ever see a scenario in which Massachusetts would do something similar?
I mean, I asked about that 3 weeks ago thinking, oh my gosh, could this happen in Massachusetts too? But the response from public officials has overwhelmingly been like, we want people here. We have all these open jobs. We want people to get those work authorizations so they can get those jobs. And we want to be a welcoming community. We're a nation of migrants. Massachusetts is a hub of great intelligence and freedom. So we want people here. We just want to know how to help them and have those resources.
All right. Sarah Betancourt, thank you for being here. Thanks for your reporting on this.
Thank you so much, Adam.